Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this evening, an event to mark the 500th anniversary of the appearance of Machiavelli's The Prince. My name is James Johnson. I'm a member of the Department of History. This is the second of three moments the History Department is marking of landmarks in history. We have marked the 50th anniversary of the Cuban Missile Crisis, and later this year we will mark the Martin Luther King speech at the Lincoln Memorial. Tonight we're talking about The Prince. We have invited two guests who are eminently suited to do what we want to do, which is to look at the past in its own terms and to look at the ways the past is still present now. That is Edward Muir, who is one of this country's leading preeminent historians of Renaissance Italy, and Michael Ignatieff, a thinker, a writer, a public figure directly engaged in global affairs and very familiar with electoral politics. The Prince is perhaps the starkest anatomy of power ever written. It follows its declared intent without fear and without hesitation, that is to show rulers how to survive in a world as it is and not in a world as it should be. Its only criterion is success. Goodness, justice, honesty, virtue are valuable only if they help you succeed, and if not, you should neglect them. It is more important to appear good and honest and just than to be so, and one should not hesitate to lie, to deceive, and to do whatever else is necessary to hold power. This is a book that focuses famously on the means of power. People should either be caressed or crushed. If you do them minor damage, they will get their revenge. But if you cripple them, there is nothing they can do. If you need to injure someone, do it in a way that you do not have to fear their vengeance. This is a book that talks about cruelty that is well used and cruelty that is poorly used. This is a book that talks about cultivating an enemy so that you can crush him publicly and therefore intimidate other people. Machiavelli writes, in order to get a secure hold on the new territory, one need merely eliminate the surviving members of the family of the previous rulers. This has been called the first modern book on politics. That is, what underlies human relations is power, that the state and its laws are purely human artifacts made for human ends. It is relentlessly secular. It mentions Moses, and the point is possibly barbed. He is the example of a leader who came to power through his own authority. Machiavelli, depending on your point of view, is either the consummate realist or a cynic. He promises to describe how things are in the real world and, as he writes, not waste time with the discussion of an imaginary world. He writes, anyone who ignores everyday reality in order to live up to an ideal will soon discover that he has been taught how to destroy himself and not how to preserve himself. The book gives a particular view of human nature. Machiavelli writes that humans are ungrateful, fickle, deceptive, avoiders of danger, eager to gain. He says that it is natural and normal to take things that do not belong to you. It sketches a view of how we can and cannot control our fate. Even the best prepared can direct events only half the time. Chance controls the rest, but fortune favors the bold. This is a book with silences. The biggest silence is its lack of all moral evaluation. How do we read it? Do we read it as a manual for success? How do we evaluate its author? According to the effectiveness of his strategies? Or is the author himself implicated morally by writing calmly and without disapproval about the effectiveness of assassination wars of aggression, colonization, and the necessary atrocities. There are other silences in this book. Whether there are moral laws that transcend the naked pursuit of power, or that transcend the laws of any particular states, the status of what we now call universal human rights. Such silences take us from the realm of the city-states of Renaissance Italy to modern global politics. In a book called The Independence of Nations, David Fromkin, who is a member of this university's faculty, invokes Dostoevsky's Ivan Karamazov to describe what he calls the jungle of world politics. Karamazov says, if God does not exist, then anything is permitted. Fromkin picks it up. In these circumstances, people ought to act out of self-interest, even if it leads them to crime. This is a reasonably true definition about states. At their worst, states are beasts that roam the jungle of world politics, killing when they are hungry and obeying no laws but those of their own nature. Where they are concerned, Dostoevsky's terrible words ring true: anything is permitted. To read The Prince today forces us to think about Machiavelli in a global context, about whether rules of ethics apply in the jungle of world politics. It may recall to us the means that Slobodan Milosevic employed in the 1990s in the name of the greater Serbia. Mass murder, deportations, rape as a strategy of war, political assassination. It may also make us question the grounds on which we claim that these are crimes against humanity. Reading The Prince may put us in mind of things done in the name of national security, the invasion of Iraq, waterboarding, collateral damage of drone strikes, targeting terrorists. Readers have asked such questions over the past 500 years in ways that make sense to them. Many knew this author only by his book, and they condemned him accordingly. His effigy was burned by the Jesuits in 1559. The book was put on the index of prohibited books that same year, 1559. It was removed from the index in 1890. The English Cardinal Reginald Pole called The Prince a book written by Satan's hand. In the 20th century, Machiavelli has been called the teacher of evil and associated with the Nazis. But to study Machiavelli in his own time is to give a fuller and possibly different sense of the man. A man raised by people of humble means who valued books, a man who was a voracious reader as a child, a man who wrote that whenever he took a walk, he had a book by Dante or Ovid or Petrarch tucked under his arm, a man who claimed to have imaginary conversations with the ancients at the end of a long day. He was a scholar, a poet, a playwright. He was fiercely loyal to his city of Florence. He was a member of its government for 14 years under the Republic. He was an eloquent defender of an independent and engaged citizenry. Machiavelli signed a letter to his friend Francesco Guicciardini this way: Niccolo Machiavelli, historian, comic author, tragic author. The particular circumstances of his writing The Prince in 1513 may be relevant. The Republic had just fallen. The Medici were about to be restored to power. Machiavelli was suddenly out of a job. He wrote this book, and in the introduction to Lorenzo de' Medici, he offered it as a recommendation. This is the context that has led many readers to study the silences of The Prince, to read between the lines, to ask if there is a deeper message to the book. And some have concluded that it is an attack on tyranny, chronicling the crimes of a despot so that careful readers will draw their own right conclusions. Some have seen this as a defense of the rule of equals of a republic.